Now turning to more bombshells in the case against alleged Jeffrey Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. Hundreds of documents and transcripts were released just hours ago after a judge unsealed the records from a civil defamation lawsuit against Maxwell in 2015. The documents detailed new information about sexual abuse claims against her and the former financier, which earlier this month she pleaded not guilty to being a part of. The files include a deposition from accuser Virginia Giuffre, and they also appear to contradict previous claims surrounding the last time Maxwell spoke to Epstein. CBS News correspondent Mola Lenghi reports from just outside the Brooklyn Detention Center where Maxwell is being held.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys tried to stop these documents from being unsealed, even asking a U.S. District Court judge to intervene with a phone call. That judge ultimately denied that request, saying that Maxwell's just trying to muddy the waters on her way to mounting a legal defense.
To bring awareness to this.
Weeks after Ghislaine Maxwell was denied release on bail as she awaits trial, she figures prominently into newly unsealed court documents, some of which accuse her of facilitating and participating in years of abuse against young women. As for Maxwell's recent claim that it's been more than a decade since she was in contact with Jeffrey Epstein, the documents appear to reveal that is untrue. In a January 2015 email exchange with Epstein, Maxwell wrote she'd appreciate it if a woman named Shelley would come out and say she had been Epstein's girlfriend. Epstein responded, "Okay with me, you have done nothing wrong, and I would urge you to start acting like it. Go outside, head high, not as an escaping convict. Go to parties, deal with it." Now, Maxwell's being held in a federal detention facility and facing up to 35 years in prison. It comes after years of allegations from accusers like Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who is not one of the alleged victims in Maxwell's case. Giuffre spoke to Gayle King earlier this month.
You couldn't say no to Jeffrey and Ghislaine because, yeah, you're afraid for your life.
The unsealed documents are part of a settled civil suit between Maxwell and Giuffre. They include a deposition in which Giuffre claimed she was sent to have sex with several high-profile men at Epstein and Maxwell's direction, including the owner of a large hotel chain and a foreign president who she described as, quote, Spanish and in his 40s.
Based on the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, do you think there are a lot of men in this country, in this world, that should be panicking based on the information that she has?
Oh, yeah, and I really hope they are very well-known, popular men that everyone would know the names of. I can't wait for the day of truth to light.
Well, Maxwell's 2016 deposition is expected to be released sometime next week after a U.S. District Court judge denied her attempts to have that remain sealed. Of the documents that we have seen, several names remain redacted, which could be an indication that the scale of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged sex trafficking operation largely remains unknown. Anne-Marie?
Mola, thank you very much. Now we want to bring in Ricky Kleeman. Ricky, you are a CBS News legal expert and an analyst, and you've been following this case for over a year now. So let us dig into the details. We have this release of documents. What information, new information did we get? And is this the sort of information that could have an impact on Ghislaine Maxwell's ability to have a fair trial?
Well, let me start where you ended. The defense has been not only vocal, they have been persistent. They have filed motion after motion, letter after letter, looking for emergency relief from the court in the civil case to not release any of these documents, but particularly the depositions of both Virginia Roberts Giuffre, which came out within the last few hours, but also the deposition of Ghislaine Maxwell, which will come out on Monday. And the reason for that, according to the defense, is that you have a 6-count indictment, 2 counts of perjury dealing with her specific deposition that's coming out on Monday, as well as the master counts of dealing with conspiracy to traffic these young women, some as young as the age of 14, to groom them, to entice them, to arrange their travel, to not only have them available for sex with Jeffrey Epstein, but also with Ghislaine Maxwell. Remember, these are allegations, and also allegedly with other prominent men. So they wanted these documents suppressed. These documents have come out, and they are explosive indeed.
And so the focus of those documents, though, the focus was Jeffrey Epstein and his role, not Ghislaine Maxwell. But despite the focus being Epstein, does it even matter? Could they still contribute to Maxwell's case?
Oh, they do contribute to Maxwell's case in two ways. One, as Mola spoke in his piece about what these documents reveal, because Ghislaine Maxwell herself, through her lawyers, has said that she had had no contact with Jeffrey Epstein in the last 10 years. And here we see that there are emails, and one, in fact, from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, explaining to her what her force should be in the press, that she should say that she has been dogged since his charges had happened in 2007, 2008, that she is a victim of slander, that she's been hounded. And all of this is dictated by Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. That's in the documents. But perhaps far more important are the deposition transcripts from one of the alleged victims, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who says that not only did Ghislaine Maxwell find her, groom her, entice her, do all the arrangements for her, but that in fact, Ghislaine Maxwell participated in these sexual orgies, if you will, with Virginia, as well as with these other women. Again, remember what Ghislaine Maxwell is attempting to say is that this is all false, and that no matter what Virginia Roberts Giuffre says, and no matter how many times she says it, according to the defendant, it is not true. The government seems very, very strong that they can back up anything or most of the things that Virginia Roberts Giuffre says. And I assume that means other witnesses or travel records or documents.
So the documents also reveal that Ghislaine Maxwell was working on a memoir. Can any of that be used in her case? Or could she simply say, oh, it's just, writing something fictional. There's, nothing factual in that.
Well, one of the things that we learned all the way back to the O.J. Simpson case is that there was testimony from a witness in the Simpson case where the witness was going to say, where the witness was saying that O.J. Simpson had told him he dreamed of killing Nicole Brown Simpson. So if you can say that you dreamed of something and it comes into evidence, I assume that there is a good argument to say that if you're writing a memoir, that much of the memoir can come into evidence unless it is really considered completely hearsay.
The documents were heavily redacted, assuming that some of the redacted portions were the names of men who were involved in this alleged sex trafficking ring. Is there a likelihood that we would ever find out who those men are? And do they have any rights?
We may find out who they are if it comes time for testimony in court and that testimony is rendered admissible in a criminal case. You also have to remember that these men, the powerful men, have said that they have done nothing wrong, that all of this is false. So it may be that the defense in the criminal case next July, a year from now, will want to call these men to attempt to show that Virginia Roberts Giuffre is not telling the truth.
So here we have all this documentation. It's salacious, it's controversial. What do you see Ghislaine Maxwell's defense being with this information being released?
Ghislaine Maxwell can have only one defense if she goes to trial, and it must be that not only is Ms. Giuffre lying, but that any other woman who comes forth and says that Ghislaine Maxwell participated in a sexual exploitation of these women when they were children, when they were teenagers, or that Ghislaine Maxwell groomed them and arranged their travel and enticed them, knowing what was going to happen with Jeffrey Epstein. She has to, that is Ghislaine Maxwell, has to try through the means of cross-examination and calling other witnesses to show that each and every one of the accusers who winds up in court testifying against her, that those people have to all be lying. It's very much, Anne-Marie, as what we saw in the Harvey Weinstein case, what we saw in the Bill Cosby case. It's one thing to have one accuser. It's another thing to have two, but it certainly becomes really difficult for a defendant if you have 3, 4, 5 or more. In this case, in the indictment, the superseding indictment that was filed against Ghislaine Maxwell, what we do have here are 3 women, minors 1, 2, and 3. But I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecution intends to call a whole host of other alleged victims who will accuse Ghislaine Maxwell of being a very active participant in this horrendous allegation, again, about a sexual trafficking empire that was not only run by Jeffrey Epstein, but was also run by Ghislaine Maxwell.
Which brings me to my last question. Jeffrey Epstein is no longer with us. On the books, officially a suicide. And you know, it took many years for the women who say they were victimized by him to come forward, to be taken seriously by authorities, and a number of them were ready to testify against him when he died. And so maybe they'll get a chance to sort of share their story again with Ghislaine Maxwell's case. But I wonder, do you see, at least in terms of the way the argument is built, and almost maybe for a little bit of satisfaction, that for Ghislaine Maxwell, it's not just her on trial. In a way, it's the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein on trial with her.
There is no doubt that the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein is ever present in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, which will happen in July of 2021, should she actually go to trial. You cannot do this case without looking at both of them as being partners in a sexual trafficking empire of trafficking women who are really girls, who are ages 14, 15 to 21. It is said that what happened was that Jeffrey Epstein liked them young, and that one of the accusers is going to say that Ghislaine Maxwell used to go out trolling for, quote unquote, the nubiles, and that it was the young ones that he was looking for. And then, of course, he got tired of them and then wanted more and more and younger and younger and newer and newer. It's a terribly salacious and tawdry tale.
Yeah, you said it. Ricky Kleeman, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.